Welcome everybody to our regular city council meeting for the city of Sueur, December 11, 2023. At this time, we'll call the meeting to order. Begin with the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Council members, you all received your packets over the weekend. Hopefully you had the opportunity to review those. At this time, I will ask for a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Huntington. Councilmember Swanberg, second. Any other discussion, comments, concerns? Going once, twice? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to presentations. At this time, I will ask Mr. Roby to give us a little review of that, and we will be hearing from Mr. Kevin Brandt. If you want to step up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I didn't tell Kevin that he would have to step up, but if you can find it.
I'd love to see him step up. Please go.
Step up where?
Right up here so we can see you front and center. Thank you, Kevin.
Well, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm thrilled to see Kevin here tonight and a number of members of his family and members of the Sueur Fire Department. Kevin Brandt served as a member of the Sueur Fire Department starting in 1998, which seems that was a long time ago. Makes me feel, well, I don't know, older than I should be, I guess. But Kevin retired just last month after 25 years of service to the Sueur Fire Department. That's a lot of Tuesday nights. That's a lot of pager time. That's a lot of time away from his family, time away from important events in his life. And I know he was a mentor to a lot of the guys who are here on the force, who were here after him, and a good teammate for a long, long time. So I'd like to thank Kevin. We visited a month or so ago when he gave me the news and shared my congratulations and appreciation with him at that time. And wanted to bring him in tonight to thank him on behalf of the community, on behalf of the city, and for your 25 stellar years of service. Thanks for all you've done, Kevin. And Mr. Mayor, I'll let you add anything you'd like.
Well, I'm just going to echo a little, Kevin. I want to thank you for your commitment, your time, your sacrifices. We can all only partly understand all the sacrifices you put into this. And when you started back in 1998, there was, I'm sure, several mentors that kind of took you along as you went. And as you leave, you're leaving behind several people who have taken the opportunity to learn a lot from you. So we appreciate everything you've done. And tonight we want to celebrate you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
The certificate, the card, and we want to thank you again for everything. Take care.
Thanks to these guys right here.
Anybody else want to step up? And
Thank you.
Thank you. You other firefighters, I appreciate you coming down tonight to support Kevin tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your service.
One last note, Mr. Mayor, I would like to thank Kevin's family as well. I worked pager for about 7 years, and the time away from family is huge. So thanks to all the family who are here as well tonight. Thanks for sharing your dad with us.
Enjoy. Moving on to the consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered routine and have been made available to the city council at least 2 days in advance of the meeting. These items will be enacted in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless the council member citizens so request. In which event the item will be removed from the agenda and considered a normal sequence. Mr. Roby, do you want to review these consent agenda for us, please?
I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Tonight's consent agenda, you'll note that item D has been crossed out. I sent a brief note to council members earlier this afternoon stating that item D is being pulled from the consent agenda. Remaining on the consent agenda are a number of items. First is approval of city council minutes from the November 27th, 2023 regular meeting. Item B, approval of disbursements through today, December 11th, 2023. Included in those disbursements are 4 items over $25,000. The first is the MMPA care of Avant Energy for $575,073.20 for purchase power for November of 2023. Second, to Kinetic Leasing, our annual equipment lease payment for $280,607. Third, to Alpha Wireless Communications for the police department radios that came in, which will be offset by the federal funding that we're expecting any day now, $89,886.56. And finally, to the Minnesota Department of Revenue, our sales tax payment for November 2023, totaling $43,455. Item C, we're thrilled to have on tonight's agenda personnel action, the hiring of a water and wastewater supervisor. We welcome Jake Hartman, who's on the agenda tonight. Item E, personnel action, the hiring of 2 temporary police officers. Item F, resolution R 2023-045, accepting work for the 2023 street maintenance patching project. Item G, resolution R 2023-046, designating city officials who can declare public safety emergencies. Item H, approve a change to our MMPA alternate representative, removing Finance Director Graff and adding Public Services Director Transfer. And item I, and the wording on this is a little bit confusing. This is an item that through the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust, we have to approve not waiving the tort liability limits. So it's improved to not waive. So the wording is odd, but that's what the recommendation is, that City Council approve not waiving the tort liability limits. It's an annual action that City Council takes every year.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Webber regarding tonight's consent agenda? Not, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Sullivan. Councilmember Schluter seconded. Any other discussion, comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor? Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Moving on to public comment. Mr. Tui, is there anybody signed in over this?
Yes.
Just for, yep. We have one for public comment, Annette Rogers. Annette, did you want to address it, just a regular public comment, or did you want to address the levy discussion tonight?
Yes.
The second of the two.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're not here for public comment, just to be clear,
No.
but you're here for the public hearing. Very good. So with that, we will move on then to the city administrator update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few items to cover tonight. First, I want to thank everyone for the last meeting, November 27th, where we had the swearing in of Sueur. The first couple weeks have gone really well, transitioning the police department, and also want to welcome our new police officers. It does feel good to be back in council chambers for a city council meeting, but I appreciate the school's flexibility in working with us at the last meeting. Tuesday, November 28th, we met with the Minnesota Senate Capital Investment Committee regarding the community center. I want to thank the Silver Sneakers members, the pickleball players, and everyone here at the table, and staff and the public who participated in the visit. It was a great visit. We squeezed probably 5 minutes out of them that they didn't have in their schedule, and I'm appreciative for that. Thank you again to Second Assistant Chief Kevin Brand for his years of service. It was great to see a good turnout from the fire department tonight. Last week, we had a Sueur County officials meeting. We hosted it here in town at the bar. Lots of interesting discussion. Brian Heck, who is my counterpart for the city of Montgomery, was present. He serves on the Minnesota Association of Small Cities and also sits as a board member on the League of Minnesota Cities, and so he kind of gave an update on some statewide advocacy efforts for cities. We've kicked off union negotiations, both for the law enforcement labor services, or LELS, which is our police department staff contract, and also for our International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 49. And that the 49ers, just for council information, have historically covered our public works, electric department, and water and wastewater departments. The union petitioned the Bureau of Mediation Services to divide into 3 separate units. So our current negotiations, which just kicked off last week, will consist of 3 separate units. And what will come to City Council at the end of negotiations will be, for the 49ers at least, 3 separate agreements: 1 for public works operators, 1 for our electric linemen, and 1 for our water and wastewater operators. Had a great meeting last week with the Bulldog Youth Hockey Association, just talking about some logistics and the potential for summer ice next year, 2024. I want to thank those who submitted letters of support for our local road improvement program application for the North 4th Street project. So at the last meeting, City Council approved a resolution supporting the city's application for $1.5 million state local road improvement aid to put toward the North 4th project. We submitted that application last week. We probably won't hear until June. That's just the timeline the state runs on, but we feel really confident in our application, and we were able to receive letters of support from Seneca Foods, from the school district, from the chamber, from the EDA, and a couple other parties. Effective January 1st of 2024, we will have several openings on boards and commissions. These will be posted on the city's website. These are at-large positions. So at the organizational meeting, as council does every year, the mayor will do council-based appointments. We'll have several at-large openings for the public: 1 opening on the airport commission, 1 opening on the EDA, 1 opening on planning commission, and there will be 3 openings on RPAC. Effective January 1st. So we'll be pushing that out to the public, letting them know that there's some openings. And just to be clear, I'm not sure if the people who currently sit in those seats will want to re-up or reapply, but their terms will be done December 31st. I want to thank all the community groups, the volunteers, and city staff who made Business in the Valley a success. I was really pleased with the turnout, especially considering all the varsity sports that were going on that night. It was great to see lots of kids. In particular, down at the event, the weather was stupendous. Last, I want to acknowledge the years of service. So every year, the city puts on for full-time employees a luncheon where we acknowledge staff for the years of service. I don't know if I did this last year, but I would like to just share with council those who are celebrating a year of service anniversary, who we will be honoring at the lunch next Monday. First, Mark Mediger, Public Works Operator, has put in 30 years at the city of Sueur. So thank you, Mark. Dan Straub has worked 25 years as a lineman in the electric department. Martin Sunderman is celebrating 5 years of service with Public Works. Justin Nielsen celebrating 5 years of service with the Building and Zoning Department. Foster Transberg has just passed 5 years here with the city, serving in water and wastewater, most recently as Public Services Director. Donnie Sippo is 5 years with his tenure at the city of Sueur in the water and wastewater department. And then firefighters left, of course, before their Baker Rob, but Kevin Corks with 25 years of service, John Katasic with 20 years of service in the fire department, Justin Nielsen with 10 years in the fire department, Nick Fesser with 10 years, John Burns has 5 years, and Lucas Lozzi has 5 years. So I want to thank all of those employees for their dedicated service to the community. We love having all of them.
Where's that luncheon
At the bar. 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock at the bar. Council members are welcome if you want to come in and say thanks or just say hi. Love to have you. 11 a.m. at the bar. Sue's got it reserved for us. And finally, happy holidays to everyone. Our next scheduled meeting normally would be Monday, the 25th. Of course, it's a holiday. So it's scheduled for Tuesday, December 26th.
That everybody's needs.
Yes, well, I don't know that yet. I haven't heard back from
I thought you only wanted to hear back if you couldn't.
Yes, that's good.
So if you didn't hear, you're gonna be there.
Presume so.
As of now, we're planning on meeting on the 26th.
Correct.
You can't make that, let us know.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
I do.
Yes.
I haven't heard, or maybe I missed it, the 4-day work week. How did that go?
All in all, it went well. I don't know if Foster has any additional thoughts on it. He came in late as public services director, but the sense I heard from the public works staff was that it seemed to work well. From a management side, it also seemed to work well. The benefit that we have a crew that's out working on projects, street work, for example, the benefit of having 4 full days instead of 4 full days and a partial day from a mobilization standpoint seemed to work well. It will be coming up in negotiations in the new contract.
Okay.
So it was a one-time MOU that was added onto the current contract. And we'll be discussing it in contract negotiations for 2024.
So the people directly involved with that were receptive?
Yes.
Okay. No, I just hadn't heard.
That was the feedback that we had heard, yes.
Okay.
And from a community standpoint, normally I will hear, or Foster will hear, or Lindsay, or anyone in City Hall will hear if there's a problem, something that's not getting done on a Friday, for example, that they would expect to get done. We tried to pre-plan as best we could for events that were on the weekend where we would need to get out and stage something or mow or clean up the street or something. And I would say there was no additional feedback from the community as far as concerns related to things that were not done on Friday.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for our city administrator with his update? If not, we're moving into sort of the public hearing before the presentation. Okay. Please.
Okay. So tonight we have the public hearing, or truth and taxation hearing related to the 2024 general fund levy and budget. And the way we structure this, I have a little outline here. This is consistent with the way we did things last year. We'll have Finance Director Graff walk through the 2024 general fund levy and budget. Following his presentation, council will not be asked to immediately consider the resolution to adopt. Instead, immediately following the presentation, staff would ask that there be a motion to open, a motion and second and a vote to open the public hearing, where we'll hear from members of the community who want to share during the public hearing. Following public comment, which will be documented, we would look for a motion to close the public hearing. We'll then proceed directly to regular agenda item 9A, which is the consideration of the resolution to adopt the 2024 budget and levy.
There will be discussion at that point.
Correct. So the discussion would be during 9A, during the consideration of the agenda. So Brian will present. I presume Brian will be comfortable with, as I throw him out here, to questions as he goes through the presentation, so we don't have to rehash everything during 9A, but the bulk of discussion would take place following the closure of the public hearing, if that makes sense.
I have some questions.
Absolutely.
Just let me know when I should jump in.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Ryan Graff, how are you tonight?
Good, how are you?
All right. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, residents that are here tonight, I'll just go up here and take you through our general fund levy and budget for 2024. So this first slide here is just a brief timeline of the budget process here. We started in June and July, probably even a little bit earlier, but the bulk of the work starting in June and July, compiling the 2024 budget. In July, actually, was our first meeting with the Personnel and Budget Committee, the first of about 7 meetings we had, including working session. And then on September 11th, City Council approved the preliminary levy and budget. And we're here tonight to decide on the final levy and budget. And then based on that, we'll certify the final levy to the county by the 29th of December. Just in summary here, the 2024 proposed levy is a little bit over $3.7 million. That is essentially the same that was approved in the prelim. It's $35 lower, so there's been some small puts and takes in there. This is an increase of $199,402 from the 2023 levy.
What's the percent on that, Ryan?
5.68.
Thank you.
Yep. And so like Administrator Roby said, we'll be motion and approve this resolution here after the public hearing. Overview, we kind of touched on some of these things here. The third bullet there is the 5.68% that you asked about, Councilmember Swanberg. That was at $3.710 and $44 in September 11th. We are now $35 less than that. Some of the major considerations that have gone into this levy are some increases in public safety investment, in particular the police department, and budgeting for more overtime funds that happen when our full-time officers shifts run long, depending on when they get their calls. There's still no avoiding that type of overtime, so we're budgeting for that. A little bit of part-time wages just to transition to the full-time staff that is our objective here, hopefully in the near future. Inflationary trends are not nearly what they were last year. They're about 3 to 4% in the past 12 months. Our debt service levy is up about $150,000. Only $45,000 of that is new debt that we're taking on next year. The remaining $105,000 is just existing bonds that we had either not made payments on last year because it was the first year, or we're moving to making more principal payments and not just interest. We did receive a $165,000 increase in LGA revenue, which was a large percent increase, so that was helping things this year. We will stay at that level going forward, but it'll be more of an inflationary nominal increase probably going forward, where we won't see a $165,000 increase. It'll be more in the single to maybe $10,000 increase probably. And then we are continuing capital funding to avoid deviating further from our street maintenance plan. So our capital levy is up about $82,000. And just for reference, a 1% tax levy increase this year is equivalent to approximately $35,000. On this next slide here is just an overview of the 2024 tax levy. You can see here, if we go line by line, between the general levy and the community center, it's essentially flat. We did see an employee allocation update of about $37,000 between those two line items. So that's a big driver of the change you see between those two line items. Our Highway 169 abatement is flat for the next couple of years, and then it slowly goes down until 2030. I think we extended it out to.
Correct.
Yep. And then the capital levy, as I mentioned before, is up to $82,000, just a little over $672,000. Our EDA levy is actually down. Last year in the levy, we did levy the maximum amount that we were allowed to by statute. And this year we did more of a bottoms-up approach and felt that we didn't need the full levy amount. So that's reflected in the $55,000. So that's some help year over year. And then the bottom section here is the debt service levy. So that's at the bottom there, you can see the $147,000. That's the round numbers, $150,000 that I referenced on the prior chart. And you can see the last line item there is the 2023 equipment certificate that was just approved, I think just a couple of council meetings ago. The other ones are all existing ones that just the way the payment allocations are working this year, it's been a bit of an impact. So overall, you'll see the roughly $199,000 increase and the 5.68% increase year over year. Next chart is tax capacity trends. Nothing major to point out here. Last year, there was a much different skew of the increase in tax capacity between mainly residential, apartment, and the commercial and industrial. You can see overall, we're up 6.5%, and within a handful of percentage points, each element is about the same. So we're not seeing a big skew in only residential property going up this year like we did last year. The next chart is just a comparison though, even though it didn't further skew, we still are pretty disconnected from where we were several years ago, back to the 2017 timeframe where residential tax capacity only made up 43% of the total. We're now upwards of 63%. So it has been shifting some of the tax burden to our residents and versus our industry. Again, another levy comparison tax capacity graph, just outlining the trends there. You'll see that roughly, where our tax capacity is going up, our tax levy is going up along with it. So our tax rate is relatively the same this year. We'll go over the general fund, specifically in this area, some of the key changes. Some we've already mentioned, increase in public safety that was mentioned before. We had a slight increase in our fire and airport allocation updates to make sure those funds are considered part of the general fund, but don't always roll up into our summary here. So just making sure that those are balanced, so we have a complete balanced general fund. Some of that increase is offset in our enterprise funds because we updated the employee allocation. They're spending more time at the airport than they are maybe in the electric and water and wastewater. So that's that impact there. And then our 10-year CIP funding, we have at about $98,000, which is an increase over past years. Again, this one just for transparency is usually been labeled as contingency. I don't really like labeling it as such. So as we've been in the past, taking you through some of the 10-year CIP plan, we have some extensive projects that we'll be needing to do with our streets. And I'd like to start putting some additional funding away towards that when we get to those projects to help relieve the burden at that time. On the revenue side, we have the LGA increase that is helping us, $165,000. And then one of the major downsides that we're seeing this year is just due to the lack of buildable lots, our building permit revenue, is going down $25,000 to $30,000 year over year. And here are the general fund revenues by year. The taxes is the $50,000 increase from the prior slide. This is just the general fund portion only, not the community center. The $30,000 negative there is the building permits. The intergovernmental line does include the LGA of $165,000. And then we also saw some help in some of our police, state and federal aid as well. And then some nominal changes in some of the other line items. And then with miscellaneous is down $54,000. A big half of that is due to the sale of Ridgeview. And this is where we get the refund for paying their property taxes. So we also see a benefit in the $25,000 benefit on the cost side too. So all in all, for the general fund, it's not an impact, but when we break it down, revenue and expenditures, it does stick out there. And then here are the expenditures. The key line items that I would point out would be the police line item that we talked about with some of the full and part-time assumptions, or not full and part-time and overtime, a little bit of IT expense increase. The street line item for $30,000, again, is the employee allocation impact to public works. The offset to that would be in the community center. And then the unallocated expenditures, that is where the Ridgeview items would get, along with the fire and airport allocations, and also some increase in IT spend there. The next chart here is just a pie chart of the expenditures that mainly just highlights in a more visual sense the breakout of the budget, and in particular how big of a portion the police and street department make, you know, nearly 70%. And I would say there's not a material change to the makeup of this chart from the prior year. And with that, that's kind of the summary of the general levy. I don't know when you want to take questions or do the public hearing first, or.
I think with everything fresh, if anybody's got a question now, is that okay? Anybody from Mr. Graff? Go ahead.
Okay. You mentioned the $45,000 addition in what I consider to be the fixed cost, the bonding, and it is an addition of the equipment certificate, correct?
Yes.
Now, alluding to what you said a couple of meetings ago, the council passed $250,000 increase over what was locked in on the 30th of September. Is that legal? Because I thought by the 30th you had to be, this is it. You can only go down. You can't add $250,000. And I don't see it here.
What baseline number are you looking at?
Okay,
We are down overall.
right here.
You're talking about the bonding on the equipment.
Yeah, there's 105. They asked, it came to 480 from, I think originally was 260 for the snowplow, new snowplow.
Okay.
It went from 250, 260 right in there. They asked for 510. They being the public services and yourself,
Yep.
according to this. So that's 250 from, or 510 from 260 after September 30th. So in effect, $250,000 in debt has been added.
That was well before that, wasn't it?
No, well, part of the 510 was the total for 3 pieces of
Is that what it?
equipment. And the only impact to the levy this year is the 45,000.
Okay, so the other 200 and some plus $1,000 is in there, but we don't see it. Is that correct? The additional $250,000 that was added on the 23rd of October by this council over and on top of the 240 or 50 for the original new snowplow was approved. So there's an additional $250,000 someplace.
Now, what'll happen with that 510, and I'm gonna speak in somewhat round numbers because I don't have them in front of me, but the 510,000 is the total cost of the 3 pieces of equipment. We had in the preliminary levy $45,000 in there because we knew we were going to be doing something. Specifically, we didn't know what. And the way we worked with David Drown and Shannon Sweeney in terms of the bond payments, this number will eventually get to maybe $80,000 to $90,000 a year once we get to next year and the years beyond. But the plan is to contain that because we already have $45,000 in here. So $45,000 next year will not be a levy impact at that point because it's in this year's. And then we're hoping to, with the efficiencies that we gain with that equipment, not need to spend as much in our street maintenance funding and hopefully keep the impact of that $510,000 to not be an impact to the tax levy.
But the bottom line is an additional $250,000 was added to the spend, not necessarily in 2024, but 27, 28, whatever. That was added in there, correct?
I don't think so. I think the difference there is that there might have been different pieces of equipment that we were talking
No,
about.
I understand it's for equipment, but the city's gonna pay for it, right?
Yes.
Yes, so what we have to certify by the end of September 30th only
Just
relates,
the levy.
well, it relates to the budget and the levy, specific dollars for 2024 only. So what changed is we anticipated the possibility of as Ryan said, potentially borrowing for it. But what we're not allowed to change is that, what we're not allowed to increase from is that $3.710
Right,
million.
okay,
And so we didn't, but what we did is,
put it in future years.
correct.
So-
So the obligation through bonding changes it commits us to future year debt service,
Right,
but it doesn't increase our 2024.
so it's a way to increase spending without having to do it in a specific year.
Well, and with bonding it, it's gonna restrict what we can do the following years too. Following me?
No,
Well,
I would say that it's not a way, one, I wouldn't say that we put it in future years because we did put $45,000 in here this year, which then essentially gives us $45,000 each year. When we brought this to council, we wanted to lay all that out and mention that here's what it is now. Theoretically, we are covering it when we pitched that and said, here's our plan that we think we can find a way to purchase this $510,000 and not have that impact the levy this year or in the future years. But we don't certify those future years to the county. It's only the current. But the plan that we're going on is that $510,000 spend on its own is not going to be an impact to the levy because we already had some of it covered in the prelim. And we expect some of our capital budget in the streets to go down to offset that bond payment.
so to answer your question about legality, how council decided to pay for the equipment aside, what we're required to do is certify finally a number that is at or below the number that was.
I get that.
in September. So council can technically take any action after September 30th after it certifies a levy. And, we also in the capital list, remove some things from 2024 to make that debt payment in 2023, in 2024 for the 2023 a possibility. So we did have to maneuver the capital list and bump some things out, some equipment that we wanted to include in 2024, but didn't, to make room for the debt service on the 2023A.
Any other questions, Mr. Toohey?
I think I've said it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions for our finance director, Mr. Graff, Mr. Roby? Thank you. With that, we will move on to a motion to move into the public hearing. Truth and taxation 2024. Mr. Sullivan, was that you? Okay, seconded by Mr. Swanberg. Schrader, thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. At this time, then, we will open up the public hearing, and I've only got one person registered at this time, and it is Ms. Annette Rogers. Annette, we were eager to hear from you. Keep in mind, we're kind of limited with our time. We have a very healthy agenda tonight, so we're
So
going
how
to
much time do I have?
we're going to give you about 5 to 6 minutes. You can cover a lot in 5 to 6 minutes.
Well, those are a lot of numbers and I don't understand them all, but I do know this. You guys are throwing around a lot of money and it looks like the biggest portion of it is put on to the citizens of Sueur in one of those graphs. And our budgets and our paychecks aren't keeping up with all this money that's being spent. And it's pushing people out of their homes. So I'm not in agreement with the levy. So that's all I have to say. I didn't really.
Well, we appreciate your comments, Ms. Rogers, and we understand. We don't like raising the tax levy either. None of us do. But
Yeah.
it's a necessary evil to keep moving along with the city. So, but we appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, we will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So move.
Thank you, Mr. Swanberg, Councilmember Swanberg. Councilmember Williams seconded. Any other discussion, comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to the regular agenda then, we'll take us. Sorry. Takes us-
Your time's up.
Takes us into the regular agenda, resolution R 2023-048, 2024 final general fund budget and the 2024 final property tax levy. Mr. Roby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as we stated earlier, Director Graff gave this presentation on the 2024 general fund budget and property tax levy. And it's now time to consider the presentation that Mr. Graff gave, and in front of council is resolution R 2023-048, which would approve the 2024 final general fund budget and associated property tax levy as presented at $3,710,009.
Thank you, Mr. Roby. You just read the motion to us. Anybody want to make a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Swanberg.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Sullivan. Any other discussion, comments, or concerns?
I do have one question,
Fire away.
and it's actually for Ryan. Just to address the comment about the graph. I'm assuming, Annette, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were talking tax capacity graph. Ryan, can you just explain what goes into that and where that number comes from? Because I'm not necessarily saying this is Annette's understanding, but I know there is some confusion on who decides the tax capacity, where the tax capacity comes from, and how that affects us.
Right. So the tax capacity here, this graph, which if you even want to go like the chart before, Joe, comes from these numbers here. And these numbers come straight from the county. So essentially, the way this works, and I might be saying things that you already know, but that $3.7 million number that we're approving, we just approve the total amount, and we certify that number, and we send that off to the county. And then the county takes that and disperses that by property based on probably a few factors, but simplifying it based on the tax value of each property. So we don't necessarily control how this gets to each property. That's all based on the tax values that the county provides to us. So we are sending them the total number, the 3.7, and then we all collectively as residents and property owners get that breakout of that 3.7 when we get our property tax statement in March or April, when those usually come in. Is that kind of?
Yep, and then essentially, and I know this is prior to your time, so maybe Joe or either one of you can speak to it, but essentially in the last couple of years, we've gotten hit with a lot of property tax increases. And essentially, it's my understanding that that was a state obligation that the county had to come within a certain parameter. Is that correct?
Correct. I'm happy to answer that unless you want to, Mr. Graff.
No. Go ahead.
So you can kind of see it, and I know it is a lot of numbers, I can understand, and I've looked at these enough that it's old hat for me, but starting at the far left, the 2017 payable 2018. If you look at the commercial and industrial, the top left-hand corner number, $1.13 million, and how that has changed between 2017 and the number in red on the same row, $1.307 million. So that's increased $169,000 during that period of time. If you then go down to residential, the third row down, the first column, started at $1.46 million, and that's tax capacity. That's the measured tax capacity calculated by the county for all residential properties within the city limits. Started at $1.46 million. We go all the way over to the far right column, 2023 payable 2024. It's $2.859 million. So we've almost doubled. Commercial industrial has gone up 169K, and residential tax capacity has gone up. So the county is obligated by state statute to keep properties valued within a certain range based upon median values and comparables across the state. If the county doesn't increase property values to within a certain range, 95 to 105%, the state will come in and force the county to increase those values to stay within that range. And for those who have lived in the community, I think this, it started to happen around 2019. You can see the numbers in this chart. Residential went up really materially between 2018, 2019, and 2020. Everyone saw that on the property taxes, where all of a sudden your home is worth 20 to 30% more than it was the year before. The state, effectively, the county had to make some adjustments to their valuations. We saw another similar adjustment between 2022 and 2023, where most residential property values again increased somewhere between 15 and 40%. So what that does is it increases on paper the tax capacity within the county. What that does then is when Ryan says the county is $3.7 million figure, and they disperse it among other factors, the tax capacity of all those properties, you get a swing like this, where in 2017, 43% of the tax capacity within the city was contained within residential, 42% within commercial industrial, 13% in apartments, and then a little sliver in agriculture. And when the tax capacity increases so remarkably in one category compared to other categories, you get the chart on the right, which is what we're looking at for 2024, which is now without any really significant changes in the property tax base other than the value on paper. And what the market does, it's not just on paper, the county does the math, and the county assessor's office is very good at what they do. The tax capacity shifts, and all of a sudden 63% of that tax capacity is contained within the residential properties in the city of Sueur. So that $3.7 million weighs more heavily on residential property owners than it would have in 2017.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving back to where we were at, we had a motion and a seconded to approve resolution R 2023-048. No more discussion, I'm assuming. If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Opposed, we have one nay, Mr. Tui. Thank you. Moving on. Adoption of this is item 9B, adoption of the 2024 capital improvement and equipment plans. Mr. Rulli.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'll turn this over to Mr. Graff again for the consideration of the 2024 what we call CIP and CEP, which are capital improvement and capital equipment plans, both for the general fund and the enterprise funds.
Okay, yep, like Administrator Roby said, this first chart here is the CIP CDP for the general fund. This list, I believe, started out roughly at about $1.3 million when we first met back in July. And that in itself was already in a more aggressive view of what our most pressing needs were. In the past, I think that number's been over $2 million. So staff took a more aggressive look to start with, and we're at $1.3 million through the 7 meetings that we had with the Personnel and Budget Committee. This was one of the most talked about and discussed items, I would say, as we met and went through that and finally settled on $672,100. If you look up there, the biggest ones there at the top, it's kind of sorted from high to low. The first 2 lines are our street repairs, both what we do in-house and what we contract out. We do have some dollars in there, about $42,000 for our police squad lease that we will be, working with our new chief, Sueur, on those, and some changes that might happen between leasing and buying, but we would keep those all within whatever our approved capital budget is. So without going through all of those line items, I might just give you a minute or two to look over those and ask any questions that you might have on those. There's really not, at least from a personnel and budget committee standpoint, much that has changed since the last time we met. I think we swizzled $2,000 or $3,000 among existing items in here, but other than that, not much has changed since the last time we met.
Ryan, how much was 2023 budgeted?
590,000.
Any other questions?
$82,000, so it's more than a 10% increase.
Yes, yeah. And it's, I would say it's less, I believe the year prior to 2023, we were around 700. So it's, based on where we were last year at this point and the numbers that we were looking at, it was decided that we really needed to cut some of the capital to offset some of the increases we were seeing elsewhere. And now it is an increase, but it's trying to get us back on schedule to what we need to do to essentially maintain our streets. I mean, it's a pretty trimmed down list as last year's was as well.
I'll take that a step further and be pretty specific. Last year at this time, and I don't have it in front of me right now, I was trying to pull it up. The preliminary capital budget for 2023's budget was north of $700,000, and we around $700,000, and then Pete surprised us with a 42 or 43% health insurance premium increase after the original initial budget was levy was adopted, and so we most of the cuts then came from the capital budget for 2023.
But it's, okay.
Anybody else?
Okay, I'll move on to the next page here, which is just a summary of our capital plans for the enterprise funds. The summary here on top in blue shade is by enterprise fund, what we're going to pay cash. We're going to pay cash for in 2024, which is a little north of $1.5 million. And then in the section below that, and light yellow is just under $4.4 million. So the total projects is about $5.9 million. And the next slides will go into some of that detail. Here for electric, you can see here the biggest item that we have here is replacing aging equipment at our main substation. That's about $2.7 million. So that we do plan to bond for in 2024, while all of the other projects that are listed there, we do plan to pay with cash. For our wastewater fund, based on where we are currently in that fund and being in a negative position, we don't plan to pay any cash for any of the projects there. We hope in the somewhat near future that will change as we get that balance back out of the hole. But the biggest, we've got the wetland banking project and some building C blower, some building CMB equipment, make some of the bigger charges listed there for just under $1.7 million for wastewater. And then for water, water is in a better position than our wastewater fund is. So actually everything here we are planning to pay cash for, not have to bond. The biggest item being our SCADA controls project that is kicking off next year and will roll into future years and be a much bigger impact than this. So $925,000 for our water CIP CDP. And then last year is stormwater, which we have been trying to build up that balance. We are going to pay cash for all these projects here, which is $80,000 for some maintenance and study, and then sewer assessment for North Main at about $35,000. But that is everything for the CIP CEP fund for the enterprise. You know, there was quite a few items listed there. I don't know if anybody has any questions on those.
Very good. Before I ask for a motion, I'm going to ask if anybody has any questions for our director, Mr. Graff, or city administrator, Mr. Roby. Otherwise, I will accept the motion to approve the 2024 general fund and enterprise funds capital improvement and capital equipment plans.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Sullivan.
Second.
Councilmember Williams, thank you for seconding. Any other discussion, comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor? Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to item 9C, R 2023-049, the adoption of the 2024 enterprise fund budgets and 2024 utility rates. Mr. Roby, you want to take us into the introductions again?
Also, let Mr. Graff continue to drive, if that's okay, Mr. Graff.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, yes, like what we'll be recommending here after we go through the next few slides is a motion to approve the resolution R 2023-049 adopting the 2024 water, wastewater, electric, stormwater, and refuse rates and approving the 2024 budgets for all enterprise funds. To start with here with our water fund, you can see here is just a look at our 2024 annual budget and then comparing to the prior 3 years. Overall, we are looking to recommend a 4% rate increase. Currently, water does have a positive fund balance projected to end here at 2023. This is one reason that it's allowing us to fund all of our 2024 projects with cash. So you can see in the capital outlay line there that that's the $925,000. So it does make 2024 look like it's in a, I'll call it a bad position, but it's not. We're able to pay a lot of cash and not take bond and have to make interest payments on that. But we are still recommending the 4% rate increase because the $925,000 of projects this year for water is relatively small when we look at things coming down the road in future years. So we want to maintain our position that we're at and be able to afford those projects in the future. So 4% rate increase on the water fund. For wastewater, on the next slide, we're planning for a 7.8% rate increase, which is consistent with our long-term wastewater fund management plan. Overall, this fund balance is still in a negative position, but we are, you can see here in 2024, budgeting for, I just need to, a little under $950,000 of net increase, net income. So we are budgeting for a material surplus that we haven't been able to do for a while. We did have a slight surplus in 2022, but we do expect to end the 2023 year in a surplus position and continue that trend hopefully in 2024. But we're still not out of the negative position, so we still want to maintain that 7.8% rate increase, which is, like I said, consistent with our long-term plan. So that's wastewater. For the electric fund, proposing a slight increase, 3% rate increase for 2024. This fund does have a favorable fund balance position that's will better position us in the future to pay cash for a lot of our projects. We do have a large project in 2024 that we're bonding for in electric, but we hope to continue performance here and, pay cash either for the whole projects, be able to pay partial cash for some of the projects, and avoid taking as much debt in this fund in the future. Stormwater, we stayed with the 15% rate increase that we've been doing for the last handful of years for stormwater as we continue to build that fund up. This expense, as you're probably aware, was previously held by Public Works, being allocated to stormwater fund now. An increased capital outlay as proactive stormwater management program moves forward. And like I mentioned before, we are planning to pay for that $150,000 capital outlay in cash. So this balance is improving, but we have a lot of stormwater impacts in our 10-year CIP street projects that we have. And once we get a better handle on what those will be and the impacts by fund, we can reevaluate this fund and where we need to go in the future. And the last one is the refuse fund, where we are proposing a rate increase of 2.5%, which is consistent with the waste management contract. If you notice in the charges for service line, it will show a negative 10%. We are raising the rates based on our actual use this year. So we are coming in a little bit under our budget in both cost and revenue in 2023. So we are budgeting for a more realistic number there. So it does show us slightly worse of $16,000, but I do think there's some upside in that where we don't need to raise the rate more than 2.5%. This next chart here is just a sample of what an average residential utility bill may look like in 2024 based on all of these increases. You will see in the far right column, it does show all of those percentages that we had just gone over: the 4% in water, 7.8% in wastewater, 3% in electric, 15% in storm, and 2.5% in refuse. The net of all these based on these average usage assumptions there on the left is that the average monthly utility bill will go about $15 or 5.5% next year. The next few charts, I might hold off on, are just laying out all of the rates by fund into some of the detail, but they're just all the result of the percentage increases that we mentioned. So I'd maybe pause before we go into any of those if there's any questions before we get there.
Go ahead.
I'm curious, when I looked at some of the breakdowns on the monthly charges and stuff, it says transfer funds. I mean, the electric fund's sitting fat. Is it ever that you take, say, X number of dollars from that and put it on the wastewater to try to reduce the impact of that? Is that something that is ever considered, or is it even legal? I don't know.
To answer your question, it's something that we don't do now. We do a transfer to the general fund from the electric department. It's something that's been discussed in terms of wastewater and just in general in what we can do with wastewater. If we look at this chart with the average utility bill, where wastewater is approaching 50% of the bill.
Yeah.
And I have looked at St. Peter and compared some utility bills there, and probably what you would expect with the rates of it, our wastewater is higher than what St. Peter is, but all of the other enterprise funds are a little bit lower in general. They're in total, they're fairly similar.
And is it true that the sewer fund is so high because there was a mistake or a failure to pay interest on bonds for the new sewer plant, that we have to accelerate that? In other words, you have to make it that much higher because it wasn't done previous years.
I would say I'll take that question. I think that's a fairly simple explanation. So enterprise rates, water, wastewater, electric to an extent, did not increase for a number of years. So the debt service that we pay on the wastewater treatment plant right now, both the Sueur and the Henderson portion, is somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.3 million annually. We make our last payment on that in 2027. So a number of years ago, council was given, I would say, a choice between a one-time significant increase in rates, somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 35% in wastewater to catch up to be able to make those debt payments, or to do a 7.8, calculated 7.8 roughly percent increase over time, year over year, to be able to make those debt service payments. So we're still in the process of that. We can make all of our debt service payments. But as a result of not increasing wastewater rates to account for the significant debt that was taken on to construct the wastewater treatment plant, we ended up in a less than favorable position. And so council acted appropriately and started increasing rates to be able to bring in enough cash to make those debt payments. We have, come 2024, we have 4 more years yet of debt service. And it's at that time that we I mean, that $1.3 million a year debt service on that, on the plant that will go away starting in 2028. The fund balance position of wastewater starts to look really, really good. So what we've had to do is, we didn't pack down enough calories when we were climbing Everest with the wastewater treatment plant. We found ourselves lagging behind and had to all of a sudden start taking in 10,000 extra calories a year just to try to get to the summit. Yep, just to get to the summit. Once we get to that summit, the debt falls off. And it's not uncommon for cities to do this, depending on, if a project, a significant investment like a water treatment plant or a substation comes in more than you expect. You try to keep rates in line so that you can afford what you need every year, but also so you can plan for the future. That's what we're doing with Ryan explained with water and electric that are in a good cash position now, but we know we have significant investments coming. So we continue to keep rates at a point where we can pay for those future investments. But you'll see it in cities where, say their water rate is lower than 90% of the cities in the state, and all of a sudden they bring a new water treatment plant on board, and all of a sudden they're in the 95th percentile for water rates because they've got to accelerate because the planning wasn't done in the past to keep rates accelerating. It's tempting to keep rates flat, even when you can. It's not always a wise decision because you're going to have, you're going to have those future investments. So for the water treatment plant, for example, that's, our staff do a phenomenal job of getting us the third best drinking water in the state. But that water treatment plant is and has been for a couple of years in need of some significant upgrades. Now we've applied for $3 million from the federal government to put toward that plant. If Congress ever passes a budget, we'll find out if we get that $3 million or not. But when you don't increase rates to ensure that you can invest in the future, this is the problem you run into. That was a long answer, but I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it's somewhere along the line, we screwed up and now we're paying the price. But, because that's what I get complained about the most. I think, property taxes, I explained, that's a county. But this sewer charge, it's over the top.
And we see it, I'll extend it a little bit further because that's what I do, I guess. Into street maintenance, right? The council a few years ago has taken a very proactive approach to street repair. And when you go years without a tax levy and deferring maintenance, it works really, really well in the here and now. And then all of a sudden you get to a critical point where you need $1 million a year to fix your streets. The only way to do that is to all of a sudden start raising the levy, which council did 2 years ago in 2021, 17%. Last year raised it another 13, 14% to try to catch back up and say, we need to start investing in streets and in our public safety. So it works better if you can do it if you can grow the levy and grow the rates with what your needs are and with your broad community needs. And that's the goal we have right now, but we still have some catch up to play. Hence the wastewater rates.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rack.
Okay, thank you. Yep, and so the next few charts, I'll just highlight what they are, but it's just listing out all of the rates that we have for essential water, non-essential water, wastewater, all of the electric rates by type, residential, rural, general, large general, and the industrial. Again, they're all following the same percent increase. All of the electrics are 3%. There's not a difference by rural or industrial that averaged to 3. It was the same percent increase across the board for all of our enterprise funds. So that's all I have on that.
Any other questions from any council members? Otherwise, I will ask for a motion to approve resolution R 2023-049. You can read the entire resolution up there.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Swanberg. Okay, second with Councilmember Huntington. Any other discussion, comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, Mr. Graff. Moving on to item 9D, R 2023-050, the 2024 governmental and building department fee schedules.
All right, I'll take that one. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in summary, going over this, annually the city reviews and amends if necessary its governmental and building department fee schedules. These schedules set the fees charged for various city services, permits, and applications. Minor adjustments have been made to the proposed 2024 schedules, accounting for inflationary factors and new equipment purchased. So those are attached in the packet. They're not in the presentation here. I would say the only changes that we made were to the utilities and equipment sections, and most of those were for equipment is just adding on some fees for the equipment that we have purchased or will have purchased. It wasn't on there before, having some consistency amongst the different types of equipment in the various departments, creating a recreation equipment section as well. So nothing major to highlight in the governmental and building department fee schedules.
Thank you, Mr. Graff. Any other questions, Mr. Graff, from any council members? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the resolution R 2023-050.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Palmer, seconded by Councilmember Tui. Any other discussion, comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor? Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Graff. Very good presentation. I want to thank Mr. Graff and his staff for all the work they put in since really this all started in June. It came to the personal budget, and the council was a big part of this too. But so we did have a work session where we got some input from the entire council on this year's tax levy. Thank you. Good work. Moving on to item 9E, the city 2024 pay plan. Mr. Roby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next two items on the agenda are perennial items in front of City Council that we consider the first meeting in December. The first is the pay plan. So back in 2019, City Council initially adopted a point and grade scale for all positions at the city, union and non-union. They established a minimum and maximum wage for those. Each position is scored based upon level of responsibility, things like that, by an outside party, and then are put into grades. And each year, City Council is asked to consider potential amendments to the pay plan. But this is item 9E, is not a direct budgetary impact on 2024. Primarily what this is for is to ensure that going forward in 2024, as we fill positions at the city, that we remain competitive with the market, because we're not only competing against other cities, but for a lot of our positions, we're competing against private business. So what's been proposed this year for 2024 is that the minimum and maximum for all grades be increased by 4.5%.
So to be clear, that chart is for new hires in 2024. Those would be the ranges of their pay scale.
Correct.
And current employees, those contracts have not been negotiated yet.
Correct.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Keep in mind, this keeps us competitive with other municipalities. As far as hiring goes, we need to stay competitive to attract good help. So with that, if there's no other questions, we will move on to the recommendation of the staff and to approve the 2024 City of the Sueur pay plan as presented. Motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Sullivan, seconded by Councilmember Williams. Any other discussion, comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, Mr. Roby. Moving on to item 9F, the 2024 performance pay plan amendment. Mr. Roby, you want to review this for us?
I would. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, this has been discussed every year. So back in 2019, the City Council adopted a performance pay policy. What this does is it does two things. It established a performance evaluation plan for all employees. So all employees receive a performance evaluation at the end of the year. It has a little bit different, it plays out a little bit differently for both union and non-union. So for the unions, it depends. In the police contract, everyone gets a performance evaluation. Their compensation is not based upon their performance evaluation, except to the extent that they would get below a 3, in which case they would not be eligible for their cost of living. That's negotiated in the contract. For the IUOE 49, local 49 contract, the performance evaluation does have some tie-in to their some additional compensation that they are awarded if they get more than a 3 out of 5. And that's based upon their current contract. Of course, like I said earlier, we're just beginning negotiations for the new contract, so I don't know how the performance pay policy will play out in regards to the unions. But for the purposes of item 9F, this relates to salary increases for non-union employees. So the city of Sueur, just for a refresher, does not use a cost of living, an automatic cost of living for non-union members each year. That's what a lot of municipalities do. With the 2019 performance pay policy that was initially adopted by council and has been used every year since, any salary adjustments for non-union members are based solely upon the performance pay table that's included in the performance pay policy. And annually, the city considers updates to its performance pay policy based upon feedback last year, both from management within the organization as well as city council. There's one proposed change to the policy, and that relates specifically to the table itself. What we've done is simplified the table by expanding the range of the scores, narrowing the possible outcomes, I guess, to if you get below a 3, that would be 0, no salary increase from year to year. Performance score between a 3 and a 3.5, 3.51 to a 4, 4.1 to a 4. If you recall last year's plan, and I think it's in your packets, it was a much more complicated scale. What this does is if you get above a 3, your effectively your cost of living increase is guaranteed to be 3.5%. What it does is, subject to budgetary constraints, it allows managers to give more than that if their score warrants it.
Thank you. And just to be clear, Mr. Ruby, you just covered this, I think, just in your last statement. There is a checks and balance with this. It's all tied into the department's budget, correct?
That's correct. So performance evaluations are done. All employees evaluate themselves. Managers evaluate their employees. Managers have a conversation, a critical conversation with employees about the score they gave themselves, about the score that they were given by the manager. Those scores are then reviewed by the director of the department, by HR Director Lawrence, and ultimately by myself to ensure that there's consistency, to ensure that scores are documented, that there's documentation supporting the scores that are given. And the tool we use is actually straightforward enough that each department, its budget is input into the tool. So when you score all of your employees, you are told this is how much your budget is, and they follow then this policy to allocate their budgeted dollars among their employees.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions? Not. We will move into the action lead. I'm looking for an approval for the amendment to the performance pay policy as presented. Thank you, Councilmember Williams. Seconded by Councilmember Huntington. I think I heard second. Any other discussion, comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed?
Aye.
One nay. Thank you. Mr. One nay was Councilmember Swanberg. Moving on. to item 9G, ordinance 603, second and final reading, zoning map amendment. Mr. Roby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are a lot of words on this slide, and I apologize for that, but council considered the first reading of ordinance 603, which would rezone the EDA owned property along 169. At its last meeting at the high school auditorium, city council waived that first reading. We're back here tonight for the second reading of the ordinance. Should council conduct or waive the second reading, second final reading of ordinance 603, it would then be published. And actually, item 9H supposes that city council will either conduct or waive the second reading.
Thank you.
And just as a refresher, currently it's the entirety of the EDA owned property is zoned I1 for light industrial. Ordinance 603 would amend the zone map to rezone the EDA property as B2 general business.
Any questions? If not, I will entertain a motion for the waiving of the second reading of ordinance 603. Keep in mind, if you want it read, you get to read it. So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Tudor, thank you for seconding that. Any other discussion, comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to item 9H, resolution 2023-047, summary publication of ordinance 603.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as part of the formalizing ordinance 603, before we publish it in city code, when it's actually published in the official publication of the city of Sueur, which is Anderson Independent. Technically, we have to publish the entirety of the ordinance. We can, however, upon city council approval of a resolution to do so, publish a summary of the ordinance itself, which is what staff would like to do. It's simpler as what we've done in the past. We just published a summary. I believe that summary was included in the packet. Frankly, what it does is it simplifies it for the general public and cuts down on advertising costs.
Thank you. Looking for a motion to adopt resolution part 2023-047, including summary publication of ordinance 603.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Sullivan.
Second.
Councilmember Schleter, second. Thank you. Any discussion, comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to item 9I, approval of agreement on final design of SCADA. It's pronounced SCADA. You can tell us what all that stands for again. Control project.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're joined this evening by Public Services Director Transberg and Water Wastewater Manager Pete Burns. I won't necessarily invite them forward unless they feel like they want to chime in on this one, but they're the experts in this. City Council last got an update on the SCADA controls project in July this year. When Council approved the preliminary design agreement with the engineering firm that's been selected for the project, which is Advanced Engineering, AE2S. Our Water Wastewater Department has been working diligently on the SCADA controls, which stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition, which is basically the heart, the brains of that run our water wastewater automation process. Incredibly complicated, lots of engineering required to make sure that all the systems are functioning properly together, updates to computers, updates to electric cabinets that are overdue because the equipment and water wastewater for this control system has reached the end of its useful life. So at this point, we're planning for construction in 2025. When council approved the contract for preliminary design in July, the expectation was that we would receive a proposal from the engineering firm for final design, bidding, and construction management for that project. We've received that. That's what is in front of City Council tonight. So what we're looking for tonight is approval of that contract with AE2S. Given the lead times for the equipment for this project, we expect construction to begin in 2025, impacting both the water and the wastewater departments.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for City Administrator?
Long for a completion of the project like that.
Says 2020,
2020.
December.
I think within a year, is that correct?
Yeah, the goal is, the equipment will probably take around 10 10 to 12 months for it to arrive. And so, if we can order the equipment in mid to late summer of 2024, then we could see equipment arriving in early 2025, or early to mid 2025, and then it be installed in the summer and should be up and operational by the end of the year.
Is there gonna be any interruption of service while this is going on?
Might as well just step up.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, the idea, will be, minimal interruption, and we will design it into the plan.
Okay, and what does that mean? What is minimal?
We will work to make sure there's no interruption. We'll work internally to make sure that any.
You want,
Yes,
Joe Sixpack will never notice.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Anybody else have any questions? Thank you, that's a good question.
Yes.
If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the proposed agreement with AE2S for the professional services related to SCADA project with the water and wastewater department.
So, second.
Mr. Sullivan, seconded by Mr. Swanberg. Any other discussion, comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor? Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. This brings us to the end of the meeting. Takes us to reports and items of appreciation. Council members, this is your opportunity to share what's going on in the community, what's going on with your commissions. Starting with Councilmember Huntington.
Again, I've got nothing other than wish everybody in the Sueur Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Moving on to Councilmember Schleter.
As Administrator Roby had already commented on, I attended the Senate committee tour of the community center, the Sueur County officials meeting on the 29th. The parade and holiday event was an excellent. It was an excellent. I also attended the Climate Smart Municipalities meeting on the 7th, and upcoming, there's a planning commission meeting on Thursday.
Thank you. Moving on to Councilmember Sullivan.
I have nothing to report tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Moving on to Councilmember Swanberg.
Yeah, just thank you and congratulations to Kevin Brandt. Appreciate your 25 years of dedicated service to the fire department. And to echo the Christmas in the Valley, huge thank you to the organizers, volunteers, and participants. That event just continues to grow and get better and better every year. So thank you to all of those involved.
Thank you. Councilmember Julie.
Same ditto on the Christmas thing. I actually went up and congratulated Mr. Edberg. Job well done. And it was a chaos.
And the weather was nice too.
Thank you.
Councilmember Williams.
There's a hospital board meeting tomorrow that I'll be attending, and again, I want to reiterate the thank you to all the groups that made Christmas in the Valley a great event, and thankful for our voluntary emergency preparedness or emergency management groups that do volunteer their time and the sacrifices that they and their families make. So I really appreciate the acknowledgement that Kevin and the group got to do.
Thank you. I have nothing to share tonight. You've all shared it very well. Everything that's going on in this community, we're pretty excited about. I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And we will see the council the day after Christmas. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to dismiss this meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Bye.